Okay, so we're live. A little late, but we're live, eh?
Welcome everybody to Saturdays with Tara. I'm Mary Beth. You are at the Law of Attraction Club on the web at theloaclub.com. We want to remind you that if you want to ask a question or make a comment when the channeling is about finished, then you can unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself and speak up. And if you'd like, you can type your question in the group chat to the right of your screen if you are on the live screen here. I'm not sure I said that right, Robin, but anyway. All right, over to you, Robin and Tara, and welcome everybody.
Well, we would say all language is an approximation. But this one thinks that you managed to convey the essentials. So welcome everybody to this little intersection of ours here. And this particular one is, well, they are all fun for us, but we have been looking forward to this one for a while. Most of you know the history of this one, and in fact, the history of many of you involves the same sort of story, and that is that his other half here, Eva, introduced him to the work of Esther Hicks channeling Abraham, and he spent 18 years really soaking it up in great detail and being in their seminars and being in the hot seat and so on. And while he perceived that Jerry and Esther were very human creatures, he had some reverence for the channeling, for that channeled entity, Abraham. And he believed that when he couldn't understand the answer, it was because there was too much of a difference between the non-physical world in all of its lack of restrictions and the physical world in which he was immersed, and that perhaps there wasn't an answer that was understandable. And then this community began, and all of a sudden he had unlimited access to us, or sort of Abraham by another, in another guise, if you will. And so then, of course, he pursued those questions and the questions behind the questions, and so he came to understand that much of what he thought was, at least at that point in his life, ununderstandable, not understandable, was in fact understandable. And so, having, of course, a great deal of reverence for that previous Esterham, he was very loath to step too far out from that at first. And he thought maybe it's just him. Maybe it's just him that wants to get these answers. But then when you get to the nature of many of the questions that you ask, such as the one we are looking at today, do babies create their own reality? These are not questions about how can I change my life. These are questions about those seeking to understand the way it works. And so he's come to understand that there are many, many, many of you in his world that want to understand the way it works. And that, of course, is natural. It is part of your natural curiosity. And so he has come to understand that in that context, and for those people, the answers that are coming through here are a level above that which he was previously hearing. They are at a level of understanding of the basics above that which he was previously hearing. and that there is a great demand for that degree of information. And so he has been, if you like, more and more emboldened, enthusiastic about understanding all of this and presenting it in ways that are explainable and logical, and that do not need some, as he would put it, some workaround answers, some funny answers, some approximations. And twice this week in the daily quotes from Esther Ham, there was a question and answer about babies, obviously, responding to questions that had been asked. And so it has brought us to this sort of watershed moment, this moment of taking a stand and saying, well, that answer is, as we said, an approximation or a workaround, but there are other answers that are not. There are other answers that are more complete and more understandable, and we are going to work through that with you here today. So we're going to begin here, if you like, with our disclaimers. That there are the absolutes, as we call them. There are the fundamentals, as Bashar calls them. We say there are two. Bashar, from this one's memory, thinks there are four, and of course you could make up that there are 10 or 100. But the two that we talk about are that you are part of all that is. You are part of the universal consciousness. You are one of the Borg collective, if you will. And that is not up for grabs. You are not at choice about that. That is just who you are. That is the fundamental nature of things. You are part of God with all the power of God. The second is that the law of attraction delivers into your experience that which is a match to that which you have selected as your playpen, as your sandpit, as your operating realm, if you will. And you're not at choice about that. And we can speak with great authority about that. You could say there's a third, which is that everything else is a choice. You are always a choice. We could say there's a fourth. You are always connected to that which is all it is, and so on. But you've got it essentially in those first two, is the essence of mostly that which we teach you. And that we would like to add here, that is the only subject on which we can speak to you with certainty, with authority. Because you see, everything else beyond that is your story. And when you ask us questions about your story, which is everything beyond those absolutes, those fundamentals, we can answer them from this one's perspective, or when Mary Beth is channeling, from her perspective, or when Rachel is channeling, or when any of you are channeling, you can answer that question from your perspective. You can even, if you like, sense the vibration of the asker and answer it perhaps from what you perceive their perspective is, but that perspective can change in the next second because they make different choices. So can you see that? We can talk of the absolutes with great authority and at great length. But when it comes to your story, it is your story. We will also say that language is always going to be an approximation. And in this case, we are using what you would call the English language. You would interpret the words, you will hear the meaning, but you will not only get that interpretation from what you hear, you're also vibrationally connected to us and to this one and to all that is. And so you are, if you like, operating at a different level of hearing than just the words that you are listening to. And so we're suggesting that as we move on here, some of these approximate words, we talk about you creating your world. We talk about the law of attraction in the early days of this community. It was great back and forth about, is it creation or is it attraction? And of course it is both. And perhaps even an even better word would be selection. that by your choices of what you believe, you are picking from the smorgasbord of all possibilities. You are selecting. And so perhaps we will start talking about the law of selection as a new way of getting across the point here that all things are possible. From an infinity of choices, you can select that which you step into. And how you select it, that we are an authority on, and that we will talk some more about. And you have your own train of thought, and you'll be making decisions and choices, even through this meeting that we are having here. You will be making decisions and choices about what to believe and how to understand things and the way things are. And some of those will be not conscious. They will just happen subconsciously. You won't say, well, I'm going to choose to believe that. It'll just be an instantaneous choice that you make. And when you do, you store that into your tapestry of expectations, you see. You store that into your tapestry of expectations. So as always, we encourage you to listen at two levels here. You can listen at the level that you're hearing the words, and listen also at the level of observing what is going on. And at the end, we're going to remind you of that and see if you can recall through this session what it is that you have been doing. And lastly, we would say here in these disclaimers that your world is unique to you. And sometimes you'll hear us say, in this one's world, this is the way it is. And the reason that we use those words is that we do not wish to imply that your world is the same as this one. And if we use an example from what seems to be like common elements of your world and his world, it is as a means of illustration. But we want to move you away from that standard idea, that, if you like, that cultural conversation, that cultural narrative that there is only one version of the world and you're all in it and dealing with it. Because that cultural narrative is so hard to extrapolate from. Once you step into that world, really the law of attraction becomes meaningless. It really becomes meaningless, because if you can have your world any way you want it, and you're sharing the same world with that person over there who can have the world any way they want it, and you want it differently from them, now we have a paradox. It doesn't work, you see. And then trying to work your way around that, you trip yourself up all over the place. And so the religions of the day assume there is one world, and they get tripped up all over the place. And some people who propose the law of attraction treat it as if there's only one world, and so they trip themselves up all over the place or make approximations. And so we are moving beyond that here. Your world is unique to you, and if by any chance we omit the disclaimer that in this one's world, da-da-da-da, then just remember that we are not talking necessarily about a concrete one world you all share, but using some what might be considered common traits of your world in order to provide you with an explanation, provide you with some meaning to it all. And lastly, we would say to you, remember that you create us. In other words, you summon us out like rubbing the genie, rubbing the bottle and the genie appears. You create us, and we create you. It has to be that way, because by law of attraction, we bring you into our experience and you bring us into yours. We would also remind you, and this is an interesting idea perhaps for you, that you can have or be or do anything in this world. You can have, be or do anything out of this world. You could create a parallel galaxy and a parallel Earth. You could be the God of that Earth. And what would you be? You would be like us, creating you, would you not? Yes, you could step out of that role and into shoes that are a bit like ours, into a realm that's a bit like ours. You say, I would like to create an Earth and a galaxy and a whatever. and a solar system and people and plants and things. I would like to create that, and so you can. And so in one leap, you could join in the realms of us, which sits above all of that physicalness and observes it. And so there, we have sort of set the ground rules for all of this, have we not? For this ongoing discussion we're going to have here. And as we said, if there's one subject that seems to trip people up, it's subjects like very young children. Because if we all create our reality by our choices, if we all select, if you like, from that smorgasbord, the reality of our choice, how can it be that young children select things that are obviously not pleasant or distressing? And as we said, if you don't understand the nature of things, none of it makes sense. So once again, we are seeking to do some damage to that cultural narrative that says there is only one world out there. So that was start with, why is it important to understand the truth of it? Then we'll get to that truth, the nature of things. And then, as we said, we'll get to babies and grown-ups and animals and plants, and if you like, the price of eggs. And you'll see how it all fits together. And lastly, as always, we'll talk a little about how to use that knowledge, because, of course, that's where the rubber meets the road, does it not? That's what it's all about. You making new choices. You making new decisions about all of that. So why is it important to understand? Well, in one sense, it isn't. All you really need to know is that you create your reality from what you choose to believe, and nothing is more important than feeling good. There you have it. End of subject. And then here you are in this space-time fantasy, getting caught up in the movie that you yourself are creating, caught up to the extent that you develop some really strong habits of creating what you don't want. And then, of course, we come into the picture, do we not? Because through your requests, through your questions, we appear. And we say to you, well, then it's a matter of changing habits, is it not? And changing habits isn't necessarily an easy task when you've been practicing them for a while. I mean, mostly you never surface them into consciousness. You never think about those habits. You never think about those belief choices you made. You never bring them into consciousness. They're just there. And so it's all about changing habits, is it not? But you can change them. And what helps in this process? Well, it helps if you have the confidence that comes from being able to make sense of it, because then you can step back and see everything in context. For most of you, it's just easier when you understand it. And the second thing is you can extrapolate, because once you really have the basics down, there is no question you cannot answer yourself. There's no question you cannot answer. And so now we move to, what is this truth of which we speak here? Well, the explanation for those caught up in a narrative that says there's one world is radical. And as Mary Beth and this one were talking just before this call began, you slip back into that very quickly. And perhaps in a way that's good. That's by design. This world, this game of yours is designed to be appealing, designed to be real, designed to create within you new desires, to give you the chance to create things differently. And so that's the fun of it, is it not? And the explanation of all of that there's multiple realities, might seem radical, but it actually is elegant and it is simple. Despite appearances, there is not one world out there that you all share. For as long as you see it as one world, as we said before, you will tie yourself up in pretzels trying to make sense of it, and you will not succeed. There is you, one of many versions, inhabiting the matching version of your world, one of many versions, which by law of attraction intersects with one matching version, one of many, of everyone else's world. And if in all of this you are having trouble imagining that, it doesn't matter. As long as you understand, as we said earlier this week, the concept of it, as long as you understand that this is the way it works, you don't have to be able to imagine it in great detail and get your mind wrapped about all those other versions of you making other choices and doing different things. Just know that this is your world and you're creating it. Yes, we know it looks like one flowing, continuous, shared world. That's the miracle of this space-time illusion. And yes, those other versions of you and the world also exist simultaneously in parallel universe. You may not be aware of those other versions because the shape of the consciousness you have chosen focuses here only on one version. But every time you make a new belief choice, you are literally selecting a different version of you and your world to step into. And in that new world, you intersect with new versions of everybody and everything that are a match to your new tapestry of expectations. There is only one way, ultimately, that you can change the nature of anything, that you can, if you like, meet up with a more agreeable version of that person. From a one world reality, you would say, I have to go to them and explain to them that things are not right, and if they just did things this way, that all would be well. And we say to you, if you believe that that will work and go do it, then it will work. If you're doubtful that it will work, then it probably won't. Can you see that what is determining the situation here is what you believe about it, not any actions you choose? So perhaps it's easier just to skip all the action and just go straight to the belief and know that you create your world, know that you can select which version of that person you wish to engage with, and expect to meet up with that version of that person. And you will. And you will. So do babies create their own reality? Here comes this question for which twice this week there was an approximate answer from Esther Ham in the Daily Quotes. And we're going to give you a non-approximate answer here. We're going to give you an answer that cuts right to the fundamentals of it all. In one sense, every consciousness, every individual consciousness, be it adult or baby, creates its own reality. In another sense, you tell us. Because you see, in your world, as we've said earlier this week, what you think is probable mostly happens. What you're certain about is the world around you. What you know is improbable will happen occasionally. What you know is impossible will never happen. You see, that's what you have decided about everything. All that is part of your expectation tapestry. Your chosen beliefs determine which version of everything you encounter, including what babies are like in your world. So that is why we say, do babies create their own reality? And we say, you tell us. Because what babies are, you see, is outside of the realm of the absolutes. It is beyond that part of you that says, I am part of God, I am part of all that is. It is beyond the fact that the law of attraction works. It is part of your story. What babies are is a part of your story. And we cannot tell you your story. You can tell you your story. It is that tapestry you've stored back there. And we're going to talk much more about this tapestry next week in our next call, in our next series of calls next week. You see, nothing in your world exists as something out there that needs to be understood and explained. It's all an inside job. The definition of everything is inside of you. That is why we capitalize the words your world, because it is yours, unique to you, and you are creating it second by second. Every time you catch yourself pondering why things are the way they are, the answer is that you have chosen them to be that way. You have selected them. There is nothing and nobody but you making choices about your world. In that tapestry of yours, do you believe that some children are born into disaster or illness? If no, then in your world there will be none of that. If yes, then in your world such things will happen. Will they happen to you or someone close to you? That depends on where your vibrational set point is. If you are living in fear and uncertainty, then perhaps yes. Everything that intersects with you is a match to you. It is this interesting question about babies or young children, is it not? Because it cuts to the heart of the essence of all of this creation stuff. For example, there is great dispute in this one's world by different factions about when life starts. Does it start at conception? Does it start at an age when a fetus is viable? Does it start at birth? And you might have an opinion about that one way or the other. But do you understand that in your world, whatever you have chosen to believe is the truth? And if somebody else is in a different version of reality, then in their world, they have made a different choice. It could be that children do not become conscious until age 10, that they live in some sort of developing stage through that process, and then at age 10 they become conscious. See, it is your story and nobody else's. So there is, if you like, if there is a debate about the sacred sanctity of life and what should happen and when it should happen and how people can do things, that is a debate that is, if you like, meaningless, because each of you makes your own decision. You even make a decision about the fact that there is a debate about that in your world. But understand that ultimately it's your choice. It is your choice. As this one says, even as there is a flat earth society for those that believe the world is flat, one day there will be a one world society for those that still believe in one shared physical reality. We know that this sounds radical, but we encourage you to reach some comprehension of it. And as we said earlier, if it is too difficult at first to imagine multiples of everything, just be with the concept, just understand the concept. Have you ever sat down to play a game with a pack of cards and discovered to your horror at some point that there are cards missing and you can't play the game? Have you ever sat down to put a jigsaw puzzle together and discovered that there are pieces missing? Makes it a little hard to complete, does it not? But once you get this, even at the concept level here, once you get this, you see, you'll be sitting down to this game with all the pieces and they all fit together. And that may be for the first time in your world that you have all the pieces, but you will have all the pieces. You will have the ability to extrapolate into any situation. You will have the ability to be able to say, what is the answer to that question? And the answer is within you, you see. And so, let us move now to perhaps the point where we say, okay, now we get this. So what is the next step? And we suggest to you the next step is the work that you have to do, the work in quotes. We need to have a better word for that, do we not? Because we do not wish to imply that this is struggle, that this is unpleasant things that you must do in order to bring that which you want into reality. Because this is the fun stuff. This is where it all takes place. We're suggesting routines because we want you to make a habit of developing new habits. This is the greatest habit you can have. Look around you now. You see, this is the world you've created. And we're not suggesting that you want to change any of it. We're not suggesting you want to sit on the moon and create a parallel Earth, although you could. We're not suggesting any of that. See, each of what you want is your choice. Each of the things that you encounter brings you to new levels of desire and new things you want to create. And so each of these is your choice. You can choose minor things. You could choose to step into a different version of that person in your world, a different version of the way the government works in your world. You could step into a different version of chocolate chip ice cream in your world. You can do anything. Those are your choices. All we're suggesting to you here is make a habit of it. So pick routines, pick processes that will help you to make new choices, choices that will change your world and make it a more joyful place for you. And that's what it's all about, you see. That's what this game is all about. That's what you came here to do. As we said last week, do you remember the time when you were told that you couldn't have it all and how disappointing it was for you to choose to believe that? Do you remember the time when you could imagine anything and go play with that in all its reality in your mind, which was a reality of just as much depth and breadth and substance as the one that you appear to be in now? We're just suggesting a step back to that. And so now we're coming back to the start of this session with us here, this meeting today. And we are saying to you, we asked you at the start here to perceive this at two levels, one at the words level and one at a step back level. We suggested to you that you observe yourself making decisions here, that you observe yourself making new choices, that you observe yourself selecting. And even as you have selected on this call, we are suggesting to you that you select now to make a difference in your life and in your new choices going forward. That if you have made your New Year's resolutions in the past about what to do from this point on, that you forget about those and make your now resolution to do that which is going to change your world. That you now take these ideas and these concepts and say, what do I do with all of this? And the answer is, whatever works for you. If it's being aware whenever you are feeling negative and using something like the letting go process, perhaps our favorite process. If it's being aware whenever you're dropping into that place of boredom or frustration or anger and taking some action, then we suggest, we recommend, we encourage you to do that. If it's going into a routine of meditation on a daily basis, if it's doing a stop all thought process, that can be a useful technique for allowing yourself to get in touch with who you are. Of course, when you come back out of that, you are back into this physical space-time reality again, and if you have by that process not made some changes, now you're stepping back into the world as it existed before. And so once again, it's a matter of intention, isn't it? So intention is not just in meditation to escape all thought, but set yourself the intention in that place of allowing yourself some fluidity, some variability, some update capability, if you like, in this tapestry of expectations of yours. Allow yourself on a daily basis to say, I'm going to go into a quiet place here. And in that place, I'm going to get a sense of who I am and the power that I have to move mountains. And in this place, I am going to allow that tapestry of mine to reweave. I'm going to allow myself some flexibility here in this, and I'll see what happens. And your intention may be, your New Year's Eve intention may be to distract yourself whenever you're feeling bad. And we say distraction in that sense is like meditation in a sense. It takes you away from that place of feeling negative and allows you to step into something different. Of course, you will return back. Once again, it's a function of the intention going in, is it not? So if you are going to distract yourself, do it with the intention of saying, I'm going to allow myself to go to a better feeling place. And from that platform, from that place, I will now move to different places. Can you see what a difference that is between, oh, I'm feeling so wretched here, I'm going to go see a movie and hopefully forget this for a while. See, what are you creating for yourself there? You are stepping back straight away into that mess that you left when you return. The intention is, I'm going to distract myself, not as a temporary relief from that horrible stuff, but as the first step towards moving to a new world. As my first step on this journey here. And so these things, these routines, and we talk with many of you in great detail about those, and of course we are always here to do that. But the important thing is that you do it, that you find a routine, that you find a place, you find a way of doing things. And as you do, so you allow yourself to step into that new realm, that new world of creation. You enable yourself to select that which you want. So we're going to call it the law of selection, perhaps. Selecting what you want. And how you select is by what you choose to believe, and there are no limits to that. There are no limits to that. And in future, we will do our best here to stick to that which we are experts at in describing who you are, describing your world and the way in which it works and the power that you have. And we will do our best not to tell you that the answers to your story, because although we may use them as examples from time to time, really it is yours. And you are the only expert on the planet, in the universe, in the physical and non-physical world. You are the only expert on what that world is. You have created it. There's nothing outside of you that creates it. It is your choices. It is this you thing here, this thinking thing, this thing that is you, that is making those choices, that has that power. Good. We think that was very good. And so, Mary Beth, we pass back to you to see if there are any questions or comments.
That was very funny. We think that was very good. I love that. Well, first of all, I'm sitting here thinking, this is just a joke, but I'm sitting here thinking, okay, now we got to change the website again to the Law of Selection Club. It's a possibility at some point. Who knows? Okay, so anybody have a question or comment, feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the group chat window.
This one is thinking he'll have to dash out now and trademark law of selection.
Exactly, very quickly. I know, I'm thinking the same thing.
Before
I
any of
like
the,
it because it's new. Go ahead.
before any of these people listening decide that they're going to make a commercial venture out of it and beat him to it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. All is well.
Indeed.
Um, First of all, I wanted to mention that through Robin, Tara has said several times of late the term parallel universes. And of course, we've all heard that term, and by now it's been in movies and TV shows and all kinds of things. And so when Tara uses it, what makes it not just somebody's story? What makes it that expanded idea, or that, if you know what I'm saying?
Well, let us get back to the absolutes here, and that is, apart from those two, you are a choice. And so we say to you, you can choose at any time. And so if you can choose anything at any time, then of course it is your story and it's always variable, is it not? And so if you choose to go left at the fork, there is another version of you that goes right at the fork. And so if you like, that's a parallel universe.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's another version of you that decides to sit at the fork and not do anything. There's another version of you that says, this is all too confusing, and you go back the way you came. There's another version of you that never gets to that fork at all because you're on a different road. Multiply that by a million, and now you have some idea of where you are, you see. But let's just stick with the fork. It's a decision to go left and a decision to go right. And you think, well, I decided to see this movie this afternoon instead of that movie. A very simple, small decision, you might say. But there's another version of you that went and watched the other movie. And it's in parallel with you. It's a parallel universe, if you will. Did we answer your question, Mary Beth?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I knew what you meant all along, but I
Yes.
just that term sort of has some, uh, quote, real world definitions and a little bit of baggage with it, maybe, perhaps. And
Yes, and you see,
I was looking for another term, perhaps, but go ahead.
well, multiple realities, if you like. Yes, of course. It's interesting that, as this one calls it now, since he was pointed earlier this week to Russell Brand and his thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
that the cultural narrative is one world. And so this one, if you listen to the news and you listen to what is being said authoritatively about the one world that you are in, it is definitely a one world cultural narrative. And it is interesting that it is in the realm of the movies that these other versions exist.
Yes.
It is also interesting that the scientific community, that which has been most opposed to any idea of something non-physical that can exist, has also arrived at this point of multiple realities as the simplest explanation for those things called quantum effects. And yet, even as they have arrived at that as the most common accepted way in which all of these things can be explained, yet it has not spread back to the cultural narrative, at least in this one's world. And why is that? Because the cultural narrative is so strong that they dare not, that they have, as Giro said earlier this week, that they've reached that conclusion, but they cannot live it. They cannot live it because it's too radical. It's too against the mainstream. And this one, of course, is talking about his world. Once again, yours may be different, but it may be the same also. But it is an illustration of the fact that it's fascinating, isn't it? That in the movies and in science, multiple realities can exist, but not on your nightly news broadcast. And that is what he means by the cultural narrative being stuck in that place.
And yet, art, and I guess you could include science in that, but I would definitely include art from my world perspective, is seemingly, again in my world, many steps ahead in quotation marks, more awake, more expanded in general. Maybe not every single artist or musician or filmmaker, but they're kind of on the leading edge in a sense, can be in my world. And so, and many scientists can be on the leading edge as well. So they're part of, oh, it's really hard not to talk one world, I'll tell you. But they're waking, they're part of their awakening, and others follow. And again, I'm
Yes.
talking my world, but anyway, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying.
Yes. Yes. It is. It is very much part of who you are, caught up in it. At least as in this world as this one experiences, and it is common perhaps to many of you. All right. So uh,
I'm
it
going
is. It is. Go ahead, Giora.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm playing with the law of attraction. So, so I
The law of selection, Giora.
decide to go.
No, go ahead. We
Decide
are.
to go to a
We are
movie,
kidding.
and there was another movie, of course, and another version of me went to the other one.
Of course.
But in the middle of my movie, I decide to go to the movie that I didn't go to.
Yes.
So I leave the theater and I go to that one, and I'm going to meet myself, the other version of me, and we are going to go and have coffee together, and then maybe we can come together again.
It sounds incredible. It sounds fantasy. But if you can imagine it, Giora, you can do it.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, within the confines of the game as you have constructed it now, that would be if you decided to leave the movie of your choice and go to the other movie, that would be a third version of you, and you wouldn't therefore meet yourself in the other movie because that's a parallel universe, and you're not in that parallel universe.
Oh,
What you are talking about is merging those parallel universes.
yeah.
And if that's a game you want to play, you can play it.
Uh-huh.
Because what part of all of this transgresses the fundamentals of who you are, the absolutes? The answer is none of it. So it's your story. And you can tell it any way you want.
Yeah.
And nobody can tell you any different.
Well, some people might try and tell you what they think of that.
In your world, perhaps. Yeah.
It can be unbelievable fun.
Yes, exactly. And so if it's fun and you want to do it, we say go do it.
Well, maybe
Yes.
one day I'll tell you about it.
Yeah, good. And we look forward to that. And of course, we will be with you and enjoying with you all the time.
Yes. I think that's actually the underlying truth of everything. That we're all together in everything that I do, you do.
Yes.
You're more aware because you can be aware of a million things.
Yes.
But
We are like you. And if you chose to be in that version of you,
yes,
or that could meet your other versions, you would be getting pretty close to where we are, would you not?
yes,
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt here. This goes back to the question of then when somebody leaves the physical, then do you get to see them again as a physical or as a somebody you recognize when you leave the physical or not leave the physical? But the question that came up on Wednesdays with Tara,
So,
it ties in with this.
well, we would say, is it part of the absolutes? And the answer is no, it is not. What happens when you transition, as you say, is part of your story.
That's right. Yeah, that's all right. Yep.
So it can be anything. You can do anything you want. And that does not, we wish to say at this point, that does not make it artificial and meaningless. It does not make it artificial and meaningless, because this is what you came to experience. We don't say that this is the leading edge of creation for nothing. Here you have narrowed your consciousness down to this sharply focused place where you are engaged with in this world of chocolate chip ice cream and saunas and dogs and cats and trees and everything that you can experience in delicious ways. You have narrowed your focus down into this shape of the environment. And what a delicious game it is. At no point do we suggest to you that this is not worthwhile simply because you're creating it all. You are here for the fun of it. You can get yourself lost in this game, as you know. Perhaps some of you wish, and many of you do, of course, that you would get less lost in it and more able to do some of these miraculous things. And we say you're already creating miracles. It's just a matter of which one you choose to create. So step back from it a little if you wish. But in no way do we wish to denigrate any of these stories of yours. They are what you have chosen to do. They have chosen to play. They are the you that you have stepped into. And so that is the reason you are here. That is where you experience desires and create new things. This is a game. This is really the game of all games here. This is fun. And as we've been talking about, you can play it in any way you want. But none of that detracts from the thrill and the enjoyment of it all. We would have you enhance the enjoyment you have for each of the aspects of this game by knowing that it is yours to control. And knowing that you can change the rules if you want to. You can play a more delicious game in the next step, in the next second, just because it feels good. Just because you want to. Or you could come right back here and narrow yourself right down to a tight set of circumstances again and say, I'm going to play strictly within the rules as I know them, and these are the things I want to change. I want more chocolate chip ice cream. I want more money. I want more vacations. I want more sun at the beach. I want more dogs to play with. I want more anything, you see. It's all yours to pick.
So now I'm thinking about something. Many times now, lately, when I, let's say, paint, sometimes I suddenly remember that I'm not alone in it, right? That actually the non-physical world participates.
Yes.
In what I do and experiences, everything that I do.
Yes, of course.
I sometimes ask, no, August, what do you say?
Yes.
Something like that, right?
Yes, yes.
So when I do that, I suddenly have a perspective about the body doing things. And I start to think now that that's actually awareness. Awareness is kind of jumping into your perspective.
Exactly. It is, if you like, becoming more and more conscious of the connection that you have.
Yes.
Because you see, every time you imagine something from nothing, so you can imagine a world that never existed. You can imagine a world where trees float in the air and where people are blue and they are 8 feet tall. You can imagine things that never existed. And where do those ideas come from? Do they come from that physical structure that you think is your brain inside your head? We promise you it is not an accidental firing of neurons that causes all these things. It is you interacting with the soup of all that is and plucking things out. And whether you are conscious of it or not, that is where it all takes place. And if you choose to be more conscious of that, if you like, that interaction, that integration, that flowing of energy, then of course that is what happens when you say, August Moon, what do you think?
Mm. Yes. And I get usually a push to be more happy every time I ask.
Yes. We are beckoning you, if you like.
Mhm.
We are saying, over this way. This is where the good stuff is.
Mm.
We are participating in your game from our perspective, of course, even as you are participating in our game from your perspective.
Mm.
It is a marvelously simple structure, and yet it can seem very supernatural and super complex when you start to approach it from this physical space-time perspective. We promise you it is not. It is marvelously simple. It is the law of everything that the scientists are struggling to find. It is the unifying thing that sits behind all of it. And so it can be understood, and it does not need you to suspend logic. It does not need you to take an act of faith. We don't ask you to accept things that do not seem reasonable for the sake of following this doctrine. We suggest to you that it all makes sense if you will just allow it to. It is elegant, it is simple, and it is marvelous in its complexity at the same time.
So it's all collaboration. My being here as a body inventing universes one after the other, and all the other versions of me fooling around with it, same things. It's
Indeed.
all collaboration.
Yep, indeed.
And that's the way that we all together can experience who we are.
Indeed.
That's the thing. Coolest of the cool.
Good. So we could go on and on for a couple of days here. I can feel it.
We think we have covered this for now.
Yes, absolutely. So if you have a closing remark, go for it.
Yeah, we would just say, we encourage you to understand who you are and the rules of the game, and we've laid them out here. We encourage you to understand that there is not one version of the world, and every time you hear the cultural narrative expressing that thought, allow yourself to say, we get it, but not really. It isn't quite that way, you see. And allow yourself to thereby increase your awareness and increase your awareness and increase your awareness on a day-by-day basis of who you are and your ability to create what you want. We have enjoyed this interaction beyond words, and we look forward to our next week of interacting with you through this one and through the other channels. With you all, we are complete for now.